All right, so I was last discussing Tang Dynasty literature and art and interesting aspects of it. And here's one poem by a Tang Dynasty poet. Actually, Meng Jiao, his original Chinese was scoffed at and made fun of by other Chinese poets as kind of grating on the ears. And in fact, I have a friend who's actually a lawyer now teaching in China. He's born and raised essentially in Modesto, California, but he spent a lot of time in China and is fluent in the language. And he was memorizing some of these poems with me, but he knows them in Chinese. And it's funny because he was saying that a lot of the Chinese said, oh, it hurt. It's like grating on the ears. Like there were some negative responses. So even though he's famous, Meng Jiao, who's also kind of known for being a little bit rough on the ears, I guess, or something. Anyhow, this is called Sadness of the Gorges, and I'm going to show you in a second what the gorges are. They were coffins, hanging coffins that were put up on cliffs. Very interesting. So he says, triple gorge, one thread of heaven over 10,000 cascading throngs of water. Splintered spirits glisten, a few glints frozen. How many hundred years in dark gorges midday light never finds. Gorges hungry froth fills with peril. Rotting coffins locked into tree roots. Isolated. Bones twist and sway dangling free. And grieving frost roots and branches. Offers tears to mourn the water ghosts. And water ghosts take them glimmering. So in this poem of him celebrating this idea of ghosts dancing on the water and these hanging coffins, here's this little clip I would show you about this mysterious ritual that was practiced in ancient China.
These costumes are directly modeled from the clothes found on Bo corpses. The coffin is authentic as well. The skills to make these items can be readily found in rural China today. But what no one has accomplished in over 400 years is to get a 500-pound coffin up to the top of a cliff.
I think the method of hanging varies from region to region. For instance, in Matangba, there are holes found at the bottom, and from the pattern, you can tell they probably have created the 栈道, which is some narrow footway perched on pegs winding up the cliff. Then they just carry the coffin up from the bottom. Another method mentioned in the archives was to send someone up there first, then attach ropes to the coffin and pull it up.
你像拱线的方法肯定和这儿是不一样的。
create this theory. But for the bow, this epic funeral ceremony would have been a routine event.
So why they did this and how is still somewhat of a mystery, and I just thought it'd be something interesting about ancient China for you to be exposed to. Again, why that they would put these hanging coffins up on these cliffs is, I don't know, but it's an interesting thing, and it was written by a famous poet from an important period. A Chinese poet that is actually much more celebrated and loved by Chinese, kind of known as like Shakespeare would be, let's say, in Britain, or is Li Bai. Sometimes his name was spelled Lipo, Lipo. Li Bai is more precise. Here's this famous poem that he wrote. From a pot of wine among the flowers I drank alone. There was no one with me, till raising my cup I asked the bright moon to bring me my shadow and make us three. That is a very famous line. And you'll notice that the Chinese poetry is very descriptive. It's not hard to follow. Now, these are using English translations, of course, and I believe that there's a little bit more rhyme scheme and meter there, but essentially they're simple, they're sentimental, there's something that makes you reflect or think about things. And again, this was a very important artistic period, the Tang Dynasty for China. Switching gears and talking about China and its neighbors, again, I was telling you that Vietnam, Cambodia, for that fact, we have other countries in Asia that deserve a lot more time, and I'm not able to do so. But I just want to acknowledge, as was brought out in the textbook, that Vietnam really faced a lot of dominance by China, and simultaneously, at some point, it was able to become semi-independent in around the 10th century, but really having to acknowledge the power of China and pay tribute. The Vietnamese were able to then conquer in the southern part for themselves in an area that was more influenced by India. But essentially, Vietnam really fought hard for a long time to remain independent enough. And this is kind of interesting. It's kind of a crude comment, but I thought it would help you understand what I'm kind of talking about, especially as we go up to modern times. And this is not meant to be offensive to anybody, but I mean, on my part to say, but I think that this illustrates something. My professor in grad school, she went to Vietnam, and she was talking about just the way that many Vietnamese think of the Chinese and other nations that have tried to dominate them. And they have a saying, she said there, that goes like this: American shit smells for 30 years, and French for 150 years, but Chinese, that shit smells for 1,000 years. Now, again, it's very crude. But why I wanted to mention this is that, think about this the Vietnam War. If you don't know about the history, at least in modern Vietnam, the Vietnamese were under the dominance of the French for about 150 years, and they fought to become independent of them. A lot of things happened in between that. The Japanese ended up coming in World War II and other things like that. But so the Vietnamese were fighting off a lot of people to keep their independence. They kick out the French, and then the United States gave money for the French to reconquer the Vietnamese, and after they kicked them out a second time, we went in and started attacking the Vietnamese, all in the name of fighting communism. But despite the fact that the war took such a heavy toll on Vietnam, a country that didn't attack us, but that we decided shouldn't embrace a system that would be opposed to U.S. interests, and we wanted to support a very small, weak southern state that had elites that did want to side with us. Ultimately, to say that China, that they're the real dominators for 1,000 years, to put their focus there, shows why even in the Vietnam War, the Vietnamese were getting aid from the Soviet Union at the expense of the Chinese communists. Even though they're both claiming communism, both trying to fight for independence against European powers. And in fact, Chinese communists and Vietnamese communists fought each other on borders and actually had somewhat proxy wars in Cambodia. So I just want you to kind of think about that legacy that's complex in light of the fact that for many Americans, it all just blends together over there. I'm going to have to end my lecture right here, and I will turn to the next one.